Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of Mailin' It, the official podcast of the United States Postal Service. I'm your co-host, Dale Parsan.
And I'm Yasmin DiGiulio. In this episode, we'll be talking about the Postal Inspection Service, the law enforcement arm of the United States Postal Service. The Postal Inspection Service is responsible for protecting the Postal Service's employees, infrastructure, and customers. They do that by enforcing laws that prevent people from using the Postal Service to commit crimes, such as fraud and narcotics smuggling. Dale, true or false? The Postal Inspection Service was America's first federal law enforcement agency.
I think I know this one. That's true, Yasmin. When I was researching for this episode, I read that the Inspection Service traces its roots all the way back to when Benjamin Franklin first established mail service in 1775. Today we'll learn all about the U.S. Postal Inspection Service from Chief Postal Inspector Gary Barksdale, who has been at his post since March 2019. We'll talk to Chief Barksdale about what the Postal Inspection Service does and the role of the Chief Postal Inspector, the Postal Inspection Service's responsibilities and priorities, how the Postal Inspection Service protects people from mail fraud, and what people can do to avoid becoming a victim. And finally, different careers at the Postal Inspection Service. Chief Barksdale, welcome.
Thank you, Dale. It's my pleasure to be here today.
To start things off, please tell us a little bit about the Postal Inspection Service and what you do as Chief Postal Inspector.
Well, as Chief Postal Inspector, I'm a direct report to the Postmaster General, and primarily I oversee all operations of the Postal Inspection Service. As you stated, our mission really is to support the Postal Service and all of its more than 600,000 employees, 32,000 retail facilities, and entire infrastructure. We're a federal law enforcement organization, primarily comprised of postal inspectors, and we really investigate any crime that involves the mail. And as you stated earlier, we have a long, proud history of fighting crime against those who would attack our postal system. In fact, we're over 246 years old. Our inspectors carry firearms, they make arrests, they serve federal search warrants and subpoenas. And last year, they made over 5,000 arrests. But they're also supported by a host of other professional and technical and administrative positions. We have a uniformed security force. Our postal police officers provide security at key facilities throughout the country. Very proud of our crime lab, which is a fully accredited crime lab where our forensic scientists do fingerprint analysis, drug analysis, tool and firearm impressions. So very proud of their accomplishments. They're a big part of our team. We have two service centers, one in Memphis, Tennessee, where we do all background investigations. We mentioned the 600,000 employees, so we do background investigations on all potential employees. They handle all of our security clearances. And then we have a criminal service center in Chicago to support our criminal investigations. We have a criminal analyst, other security specialists, and other technical positions within the inspection service. Now, we're stationed throughout the U.S., including the U.S. territories of Puerto Rico and Guam. And we also have a few international positions that people will be surprised to know. We have a full-time inspector in Germany. We have one at the Netherlands at The Hague. We have an inspector in Jamaica. And then we have an inspector in Bern, Switzerland, who's a part of the Universal Postal Union.
Wow, I had no idea.
So, Chief Barksdale, you have a long history with the Postal Inspection Service, including, I believe, 3 years as Deputy Chief Inspector. What are some of the other roles you've had within the agency?
Yes, I've had about 23 years with the Postal Inspection Service. I started many years ago. I was living in Virginia at the time, and my first assignment was actually to Los Angeles, so it was kind of quite the surprise, but it turned out to be the best thing of my career, to experience something new. And Los Angeles was a great place to start my career. Obviously, there's a lot of crime fighting to be done in a city like Los Angeles. From there, I was fortunate enough to be promoted back here to Washington, D.C. in headquarters, where I spent some time in internal affairs. My first leadership position. From there, I moved out to Phoenix, Arizona. And then my first executive leadership role was the inspector in charge of Houston Division. And then somehow I kind of made my way back to D.C., where I spent some time in the field, headquarters working on our criminal programs, and then eventually promoted to deputy chief. And then in 2019, was fortunate enough to be appointed by the Postmaster General as the chief postal inspector.
Wonderful. So what made you want to become a postal inspector?
Well, prior to being a postal inspector, I actually was a local detective here in the state of Virginia, and I was in a narcotics and vice unit. And one day I was sitting around in our unit, and a postal inspector walked in talking about a drug case that he had, and that was really my first introduction to the postal inspector. So we worked that case, and I got to know him. He became a good friend, but more importantly, I got to know all the cool things that postal inspectors did. I wanted to be a part of that.
So in all of your years working in law enforcement, what are some of your standout cases? What are the ones that really stand out in your mind?
I'd probably go back to my early days when I was a brand new inspector in Los Angeles. Remember, I came from a local police department in Virginia. So working in Los Angeles actually gave me the opportunity to work some cases of some famous people. I won't give their names, but it's pretty cool to be at your office at 9 o'clock in the morning and then, at noontime be in Hollywood working some cases. So that was pretty cool.
That actually does sound pretty cool.
It sounds like every day would be really different in terms of working as an inspector and just the different things that you get to work on. That sounds really interesting to me.
Yeah, that's one of the things that attracted me to the job. Every day is different. You never know what your day is going to look like. You may walk into the office with one intent, but as you're following a case, as you're following an investigative lead, it leads you to do something else.
That's really neat. So does the Postal Inspection Service get involved whenever a crime is committed using the mail, or are there sort of certain or specific crimes that you guys really focus on?
Yeah, we do. We generally get involved whenever a crime involves the mail, but we know we have to prioritize, and we generally prioritize in 4 kind of large buckets. Obviously, our number one priority is the safety of our employees. We mentioned earlier the Postal Service employs over 600,000 people. That's a lot of people, so that's our top priority. Those are things like robberies, burglaries, or assaults. We also have a core of specially trained inspectors. We call them our dangerous mail investigation inspectors. And they investigate things like white powders or suspicious parcel. And we determined the need for that shortly after the 2001 anthrax mailing. So they're specially trained and they have really specialized equipment to be able to go in and test the powder and quickly resolve it. 99.9% of the time, it's not a harmful substance, but in that very, very slim chance that it is, we want to know as early as we can, and this is a harmful substance. We also do a lot of work around emergency response. As you might have noticed recently, there was a tornado that swept through the Midwest, so we go in with disaster recovery, assessing the condition of our facilities and make sure they're safe to do there, and also with locating employees that might be missing. One of our other large priorities is drugs in the mail. Obviously, with the opioid crisis just really gripping our country and the number of overdose deaths continuing to increase, we place a lot of emphasis in ridding the mail stream of drugs. A couple years ago, we created what we call our Contraband Interdiction and Investigation Team. We refer to it as CI2. Their sole purpose is to investigate drug traffickers who will attempt to use the mail to traffic their drugs. We developed a pretty rich strategy around that where they focus on traditional investigation like any drug unit would do. They do interdictions. We use data analytics, technology, and then we're leveraging our partnerships. Obviously, DEA is the law enforcement agency that's primarily responsible for ridding drugs in America, but we support their mission. They support our mission, and we work very well with DEA, FBI, HSI, and Customs Border Patrol. So we try to leverage those partnerships as well.
I want to hear more about the forensic lab. What kind of work is done there? I know you mentioned fingerprinting and whatnot, but what's some of the larger work? Do we also participate with other agencies, for things like surge support? You said it's certified or accredited.
Yeah, so they're a fully accredited lab, and they would really do all the cool things that you see on TV from any crime lab, and they do work with other labs. For instance, we have an initiative now with DEA. And that initiative deal with the analysis of drugs, trying to determine where the drugs actually originated by the chemical makeup of the drug itself. So that's really exciting. So we work with that. And they also have response capabilities. So they're located in Dulles, Virginia. But in an unfortunate case of an employee homicide or some other horrific crime, they have the ability to deploy and process the car, collect evidence right on the crime scene, take photos, and basically document the crime scene for us.
Wow, really impressive.
I think another main focus of the inspection service is mail fraud. Is that correct? Can you explain what that is?
Yes, we have a long legacy of fighting mail fraud ever since the mail fraud statute was enacted in 1872. Through the early 1900s, investigations like Charles Ponzi, who's considered the father of illegal pyramid schemes. And we see these scams all too often, and they all too often focus on our most vulnerable population. They focus on our military, they target the unemployed and the elderly.
So how does the inspection service fight mail fraud?
Yeah, so protecting our elder and our veterans is one of our highest priorities. So to start with, we're part of Department of Justice Transnational Elder Fraud Strike Force. This is a multi-agency strike force, and recently we launched an initiative to attack the money mules. So if you're not familiar with money mules are people who, at someone else's direction, they receive and move money that are obtained from the victims. So in early December, we announced the results of this money mule initiative. We charged over 30 people. We served over 4,000 warning letters, and more importantly, we recovered approximately $3.7 million in fraud proceeds that we're hopefully will be able to get back to the victims. We also work with the industry, companies like Western Union and MoneyGram, to make sure that their practices and policies don't favor scammers. So we do that. And then we have a really robust prevention campaign. At the time that we go in and arrest someone, it's almost too late. The crime has already occurred. So we put a lot of emphasis on prevention. We launched something a couple years ago called Operation Protect Veterans, where the Inspection Service provided information and resources to our military veterans, their loved ones, and their other friends and family. Recently, we've employed a number of victim service specialists who can work with elderly victims. One of the troubling things that we see with our elderly victims is not only are they victimized one time, often they're victimized multiple times. So our victim service specialists can aid them in getting help, reaching family members, and working with local social services type resources to get them help so they're not re-victimized. And that's something that everybody can do right now. If you go to our website, usps.gov, we have a number of PSAs and short videos on there that'll give you prevention tips. They're kind of our latest scams to give you prevention tips of how not to become a victim.
That's really great. I think for a lot of people, if you become a victim of a scam, you might feel shame and you might not want to ask for help. And then maybe you are susceptible because you just don't know the warning signs and what to look out for. So I think these sort of customer outreach efforts are really, really great.
Absolutely. So in an age where first-class mail is in a decline, where customers are using more electronic forms of communication, does that mean that we're seeing a decline in these types of criminal cases, or is it just exacerbating and complicating things?
Yeah, unfortunately, we're not seeing a decline. Criminals continue to evolve. We talked about the explosion in e-commerce, where criminals take advantage of the current situation. I'll give you a really good example. During the early parts of the COVID crisis, we saw just an explosion in scams around COVID. We saw hoarding and price gouging of personal protective equipment. We had cases where online sellers or distributors were charging 10 times the value of an item like gloves and masks. We saw scams related to the economic impact payment. And then obviously something that's been around since the early 1900s, we obviously saw a lot of scams around phony COVID cures and treatments where someone would go online and sell a vitamin or a supplement that would allegedly prevent someone from getting COVID.
So with the world being in the way it is right now, where communication is so instantaneous, and we live in a society where when we want things, we can get them fairly quickly using online marketplaces and various communication trends, I feel like it would take the inspection service a lot of resources in order to stay on top of all this. How is that? Can you talk a little bit more about the proactive stance that the inspection service has to take?
Yeah, you're right. With the speed of information now, it works for us in some occasions and it works against us, right? It works for us when we need information. It works against us because the criminals also can adapt and change their pattern very, very quickly. So we invest in a lot of tools to help us manage not only communication, but manage all the data we may receive or manage all the data that we'll have to quickly call through. And when I was a brand new inspector, we did everything manual. For instance, if you subpoena records and you had grand jury subpoena material, I literally took a ruler and went line by line. Now we have technology that can comb through doing keyword searches to pull out relevant information.
So trade-offs. You have more tools, but so do the other people who are making your job necessary.
So we're constantly looking for tools and intelligence and ways to do things smarter, not necessarily harder.
So as Dale kind of alluded to earlier, a lot of communications are moving from mail into online communications. Does the Postal Inspection Service have any initiatives related to cybercrime prevention or enforcement?
Yes, we actually have stood up a cybercrimes unit. They work very closely with the Postal Service's Chief Information Security Officer, and they investigate all cyber intrusion. But they're also an integral part of, as the Postal Service grow their digital products, they play a role in providing security for those new digital products and e-commerce activities.
Oh, like Informed Delivery, one of our digital products. Now, in terms of other issues or crimes with the mail system, does the Postal Inspection Service have any initiatives related to package theft for residential customers? I'm thinking of, if I'm a residential customer, the package gets delivered on my front porch and someone comes by and swipes it. Is that something that the inspection service would investigate, or is that more of a local law enforcement matter?
Both. As I said earlier on, we work very closely with other law enforcement agencies. We refer to it as porch pirates. It is very concerning, but we do have some initiatives, particularly around this time, to work with local police departments to do some, for lack of a better word, some sting operations to arrest would-be porch pirates.
So you had mentioned previously that there's online resources for customers to go on and learn more. I think you referred to them as PSAs. So what are some other items that customers can go through? Is there any other places that they can reach out for assistance?
Well, I would give them some advice. I want to drive you to our website. You can also go to the FTC website as well and other law enforcement websites as well. But really, there are some simple tips, particularly when it comes to protecting our elderly, that you can follow. One is encourage your loved ones to ask for advice before they make any large financial purchase. Right? If you're going to make a large financial purchase, you should get some advice, or you want to get some advice. Something that's very simple that I do is review your credit card bank statements monthly. For years, my bank has tried to get me to discontinue mailing my statements and review it online. But I use that envelope when I receive my statements once a month. That's my sign to go in and review my statements for unauthorized charges. And you can do that also for your loved ones. And you can also work with your financial institution to give you alerts. So I have an alert on my kids' accounts, for instance. If they purchase something more than $100, I get an alert saying they purchased something for more than $100. You can go in and review that transaction. Those would be early warning signs that your loved one or elderly parent is being taken by a scammer. There's also do not call lists you can ask to be placed on. You can register your numbers so scammers won't call. I encourage my mother to only answer known callers. So we programmed all the family members in the phone so they only answer known callers. So those are ways. And then, Yasmin, you mentioned it earlier. It is really critically important that you actually report it. Because of shame, a lot of people will not report it, particularly if they don't lose a lot of money.
So I had a question. I know you mentioned contraband in the mail in terms of things like opioids or, other drugs that go through the mail. But I remember, about 20 years ago now, there was the anthrax through the mail. And I was just wondering, if you could talk a little bit about what the Postal Inspection does to detect those sorts of hazards and what kind of protective measures were put in place.
Yeah, so we have in all of our facilities, we have something called BDS, which is Biohazard Detective Systems. But more importantly, as I mentioned earlier, we have over 400 specially trained inspectors that have specialty equipment to be able to go in and immediately test the substance to determine whether it's hazardous or nothing. And last year, they responded to over 2,000 incidents and were able to resolve all of them.
Wow, that's really impressive.
I have a very selfish question. Do we have any drug-sniffing dogs?
The short answer is no, but the true picture is we use dogs in our facilities every single day because we have such good relationships with our partners that have dogs, primarily local police departments, but we do utilize dogs from Customs and Border Protection as well.
Dale, you won't be able to play with the dogs. They're working.
And we actually have a new initiative as part of our robust drug strategy where we've actually started to deputize local police departments to come work hand-in-hand, side-by-side with postal inspectors every single day. Now, some of our task force officers have been allowed to bring their local PD dogs with them, so we do have dogs as a part of our drug task force.
So are there any common misconceptions about the Postal Inspection Service?
Yeah, if you hadn't been introduced to the Postal Inspection Service, the title itself sometimes can be misleading. Postal Inspector, people think we actually spend most of our time just inspecting packages, when the reality is we're an investigative unit. We spend most of our time investigating crimes related to the Postal Service.
Chief, understanding the size and scope of the Postal Inspection Service and hearing your own story about getting exposure to the Inspection Service and really being motivated to try and become a part of this agency, is there any opportunities in the near future for any of our listeners who might be interested in joining?
Yeah, so we're always looking for talented people. The best way to know what jobs we have available is to visit our website at uspis.gov.
And then so Why do you think that people come to work for the inspection service? What kinds of people are you looking for?
Well, first of all, it's a great place to work. We spend a lot of time fostering an environment of engagement, teamwork, and collaboration. And what we're looking for more than anything is integrity and good character. We train a lot of our skill sets, but we have to start with integrity and character. And for our inspector positions, there are some minimum requirements like a 4-year degree. You have to come to us prior to your 37th birthday, unless you're a veteran. There's some exceptions for your veterans. But we have other positions that are not inspector positions where the qualifications are really based on the position. For instance, forensic scientist, right? So you'd have to have some type of forensic science degree to do it. But we have a variety of positions that we're looking for.
What does the training look like for postal inspectors?
The training is really, really good, I must say. So we have a fully accredited academy that's here in the D.C. area. It's in Potomac, Maryland. It's a 16-week resident program, meaning you stay on campus for the full 16 weeks. And we teach you pretty much everything. We teach you, obviously, criminal law, but we teach you how to drive. We teach you how to shoot. We teach you how to defend yourselves and, more importantly, defend others. So it's really a good time. It's a beautiful facility. And the students really learn a lot. They're well prepared to go out and be United States Postal Inspectors when they leave our training academy.
Oh, that's really interesting. I had no idea.
The audience can't tell this because clearly we're on a podcast, but my jaw has been dropped for most of this podcast because I'm just blown away at just the size and scope of the Postal Inspection Service.
Yeah, it's really a reflection of the size and scope as the Postal Service. The Postal Service is one of the largest civilian employers in our country and probably in the world. So it's a massive job, which creates a lot of opportunity for inspectors to do many different things. And that's one of the unique things about being a postal inspector. You're a federal law enforcement agent, but you support and protect a business. And that's very important to us, and it actually provides a unique opportunity. As you know, the Postal Service is moving. We have a new Postmaster General, Louis DeJoy. He's unleashed his Delivering for America plan. So the forecast is really good, and we want to be a part of that growth within the Postal Service.
Agreed. And where does the funding come for all of the Postal Inspection Service operations?
We're 100% funded by operating funds from the Postal Service. No tax dollars goes through my salary or anybody in this Postal Inspection Service.
You've really shown just the scale of the Postal Inspection Service and all the work that they do to try to protect our employees, protect our facilities, as well as protect anything moving through our system. It's really impressive.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed my time here today. And hopefully you learned something that you didn't know about the Postal Inspection Service. I'm very proud of the accomplishment of all the men and women that make up our organization.
Okay, it's time for Did You Know? In this segment, Yasmin and I each share a fun historical or cultural fact about the Postal Service.
It's a chance for us to shed some light on parts of the Postal Service and its history that most people probably have never heard of. Mind if I get us started this time, Dale?
Please do.
Did you know that the farthest a U.S. postage stamp has ever traveled is 3.2 billion miles and counting?
That seems kind of impossible.
Not if that stamp was launched into outer space. Just before the New Horizons spacecraft launched from Cape Canaveral in 2006, the NASA mission team put a postage stamp on board the spacecraft. Specifically, it was a 1991 Pluto Not Yet Explored stamp. I like to think that stamp was still in place when New Horizons did its flyby of Pluto in July 2015.
Of course, but Yasmin, if New Horizons passed Pluto in 2015, it must be a lot farther away than 3.2 billion miles by now.
You're right. The Guinness World Record for stamp travel was awarded at that 3.2 billion mile marker shortly after the spacecraft left Pluto. But since then, New Horizons has traveled another 1 billion miles to the Kuiper Belt, where it continued to send images back to Earth. In fact, NASA has said it's possible that New Horizons has enough power and fuel to keep exploring well beyond 2030.
Didn't NASA and the Postal Service team up for an Apollo-level anniversary stamp a few years ago?
They did. It was for the 50th anniversary of the first moon landing in 1969. Actually, the Postal Service and NASA have collaborated a bunch of times over the years. One of the most recent featured images of the sun on a series of Sun Science Forever stamps. The 2021 Sun Science stamp issue features 10 different images of solar activity captured by NASA's Solar Dynamics Observatory.
Some might say that's out of this world.
Very funny. What have you got for this episode?
Well, for my Did You Know, we're going from Pluto to Jupiter.
Oh, cool. The planet Jupiter?
No, I'm talking about the hot air balloon named Jupiter, which made the first ever airmail flight for the Postal Service in the late 1850s.
Interesting. I didn't realize the Postal Service used hot air balloons to deliver mail.
Well, technically they didn't, and it turns out there's a good reason for that. In August of 1859, an aeronaut named John Weiss loaded 123 letters onto his balloon in Lafayette, Indiana, and took to the sky en route to New York City. Weiss was a famous balloonist back in the 1800s. He built his first balloon in 1835 when he was only 27 years old.
Indiana to New York? That seems like a really long trip for a balloon.
Well, it would have been. Unfortunately, it didn't take long for that historic first flight for the Postal Service to go south. Literally. Weiss had to get the balloon up to 14,000 feet to find a wind current. Unfortunately, that wind was blowing to the south, not the east. After covering only about 30 miles in 5 hours in the wrong direction, Weiss landed in Crawfordsville, Indiana. That mail eventually made it to New York, but on board a train.
I guess airmail would have to wait for the early 20th century.
That's right, but we'll get more into the dawn of airmail in a future episode. For now, anyone who wants to reminisce about what might have been can visit the Smithsonian National Postal Museum in Washington, D.C. The museum has a piece of mail from Weiss's first and only mail flight. It's a letter with a 3-cent stamp that was sent to an address on New York City's West 26th Street. That wraps up Did You Know?
Wait, Dale, we didn't establish a winner today.
I was hoping you wouldn't bring that up. I think it's clear to say that space travel beats misguided hot air balloon.
I agree. Just wanted to hear you say it. Thanks for joining us for Did You Know? So Dale, what did you think about our conversation with Chief Barksdale?
I'm going to keep saying it. I am blown away at all the work that the Inspection Service does, specifically the forensics lab. The fact that we have a self-funded location that can handle all of the crime-fighting solutions that we need is really impressive. How about yourself?
To be honest, I thought you were going to say you wanted to advocate for those canine dogs.
I do. If the audience doesn't pick up on this yet, I absolutely love dogs.
For me, it was really interesting to hear about all of their outreach efforts around scams, particularly for the elderly and for the veterans. You know, it's so easy for people to get targeted by things and not know that something is wrong until it's too late. So I think to Chief Barksdale's point, putting that out there and being proactive is really important. And it's great to hear about all the different ways that they try to reach out to customers.
Yeah, I think we take it for granted how accustomed we are with technology, and it's easier for some of us to pick up on scams that we may receive via phone calls and text messages, but for other members of our community, it's not so easy, and it's easy to lose sight of that.
So Dale, do you think you could make it through the training to be a postal inspector?
I'm not so sure.
Well, to our listeners, thank you for listening to our episode with Chief Barksdale. If you're interested in learning more about how to protect yourself and loved ones from fraud, or if you're interested in employment information and think you can handle the training, please visit www.uspis.gov.
Don't forget to subscribe to Mailin' It wherever you get your podcast to make sure you don't miss the next episode. And follow along on Instagram at US Postal Service, Twitter at USPS, and on Facebook.